All right. The Richard Kapuscinski lecture series transcends mere events. It embodies a vibrant intellectual legacy. Since 2009, this platform has hosted the brightest thinkers of our time. Over 50,000 people have participated in over 150 lectures. This project series serves as a vital bridge connecting the profound insights of the past with the pressing realities of the present. Here at Maqsut Narikbayev University, in the very heart of Astana, we are proud to welcome Kapuscinski Development Lecture Series for the first time in the project history to the Central Asian region. We are honored to continue this essential dialogue and to keep its illuminating flame alive. Now, it's my distinct honor to pass the floor to our host today, our provost, Dr. Sergey Pen from Maqsut Narikbayev University. So, Dr. Pen, please.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues and students, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to Maqsut Narikbayev University for the first ever Kapuscinski lecture in Central Asia event. The Kapuscinski lecture series, named after the renowned Polish journalist and thinker Ryszard Kapuscinski, provides a platform for critical discussions on pressing global challenges. Each lecture focuses on a specific aspect of sustainable development, encouraging dialogue between scholars, policymakers, and the wider public. Today's lecture explores the important theme of inclusive development, a subject of particular relevance for the academic community in Central Asia and in Kazakhstan as well. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the United Nations Development Programme and the European Commission for their continued support in bringing this global initiative and event to our region. We are especially pleased to welcome our close partners and friends, the European Union delegation, the UNDP resident representative in Kazakhstan, and the Embassy of the Republic of Poland. Your presence here underscores the strong spirit of international collaboration that this lecture series embodies. A special word of thanks goes to Professor Abhimanyu Sharma from the University of Cambridge, our distinguished speaker today. We are truly grateful that he made the journey to Kazakhstan to join us in person and share his insights with our academic community. Finally, we warmly welcome all our colleagues, students, and everyone who is with us today. Thank you for being here, and I wish you a productive and inspiring session. Thank you.
The Ryszard Kapuscinski Lecture Series is organized jointly by the European Commission, the United Nations Development Programme, and the partner institutions. UNDP is a UN Global Development Network, an organization advocating for change and connecting countries to knowledge, experience, and resources to help people build a better life. We are proud to have here with us our long-standing friend of Maqsut Narikbayev University, UNDP resident representative in Kazakhstan, Ms. Katarzyna Wawiernia. So, Katarzyna, please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Excellency Mr. Michał Łabęda, Mr. Maciej Madaliński, Dr. Pen, dear participants and especially dear students. On behalf of the United Nations Development Programme in Kazakhstan, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us today, both in person and also online. First, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks to our strategic partners at the European Commission. Their support and funding made this lecture series possible. And we are truly grateful for their commitment to raising awareness about global challenges among the students around the world. A special thank you to the university, of course, to today's esteemed speaker, Professor Sharma. We are honored to have you here as part of this first ever Kapuscinski lecture in Central Asia. You're probably wondering why I'm pronouncing this name so well, Ryszard Kapuscinski. It's because I'm also Polish. So you are today surrounded by 3 Polish that are doing this opening at university. And I would like to very shortly share with you my memories, my personal memories from Angola, Luanda, where I worked 20 years ago. And Polish ambassador was really passionate about Ryszard Kapuscinski reportage. And I also read his books. And there was this book about Luanda, Angola, and independence in this country. And he was the only remaining journalist in Luanda, the only European remaining journalist in this country. And descriptions that he makes are so real. When you just read this book, you see it, how it was actually happening in Luanda, including the streets. I was able to go back to this time and imagine how it was. Unfortunately, Ryszard Kapuscinski was to come and visit, but he was already sick. And of course, you know, he died a few years ago. And I know that my colleague here from European Union will tell you more about Ryszard Kapuscinski. The Kapuscinski lecture series, named for Ryszard Kapuscinski, a Polish journalist and writer, were launched in 2009 by UNDP, the European Commission, and partner universities. And it has been a platform for raising awareness among students about the most pressing global development issues. Since its inception, over 50,000 participants have attended over 150 lectures that tackle vital topics such as climate change, education, peace and security, human rights, and migration. This discussion challenge conventional thinking and encourage critical, analytical, out-of-the-box, something that universities are very good at. Today's lecture on the role of language policies in international affairs promises will explore how the best devise an overall language policy that can lead to individual and societal growth and inclusion. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and engaging in meaningful way. Thank you very much, and I wish a very enjoyable lecture. Thank you.
Work of Ryszard Kapuscinski was focused on covering developing countries, clash of cultures, revolutions, and liberation struggles. He is one of the legends of the Polish journalism, and this project is strongly supported by the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnership, which is responsible for formulating the EU's international partnerships and development policy, with the ultimate goal to reduce poverty, ensure sustainable development, and promote democracy, human rights, and the rule of law across the world. We have another friend of MNU here with us, Mr. Maciej Madaliński, Deputy Head of the Mission and Head of Political Press and Information Section of the European Union to Kazakhstan, who is here with us and to whom I would like to pass the floor, please.
Rahmet, Kairutan, Dobre utro, good morning. We have a language policy today as a topic. Hence, I will try to mix languages, but mostly it will be in English. Excellencies, Ambassador of Poland, Michał Łabęda, Head of UNDP, Katarzyna Wawiernia, dear Provost, Dr. Sergei Pen, dear Professor, dear students, kurmety dostar. Let me start with, indeed, as representative of the European Union, giving some background to why actually we are here, why this event. Yes, it's been an event funded by the European Commission since, I think, 2009. But as Katarzyna already said, first time we are in Central Asia. Recently, the engagement of the European Union in Central Asia, I would say very active already for the past 30 years, has intensified visibly even more. And I would like to mention the Global Gateway. Maybe those of you who are watching the news are aware that there was recently in Samarkand the first full-fledged EU Central Asia Summit with the presence of all the presidents of the Central Asian states and also the President of the European Commission and President of the European Council. That means that, let's say, the institutions that are the most important, both on the side of the Council, which groups member states, and of the Commission, which actually manages everyday functioning of the EU, showed the highest commitment to cooperation with the region. And at this event, among others, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, she mentioned 12 billion euros to be mobilized altogether to strategic cooperation with the region. Of course, this is going to be also a mix, I mean, not just grants, but a mix of, first of all, engagement of European and global financial institutions, and a lot of focus on infrastructure, on connectivity, on building bridges. And at this point, if the organizers are ready, I would like to show you a short video about Global Gateway, which is our flagship initiative, not only for Central Asia, but also beyond, which is our offer providing sustainable and very importantly, transparent approach to infrastructure investment, to connectivity, and to building bridges exactly between Europe and the rest of the world. Please.
The world is changing. We need stronger, smarter connections. Facing big challenges, the European Union and Central Asia are creating new opportunities for both regions, investing in modern transport routes, digital connectivity, green energy, responsible mining, and supply chains. We are proud to support hydropower projects that bring clean, reliable energy to millions. The Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor will connect Europe and Asia in 15 days. The European Union and partners are mobilizing 10 billion euros in sustainable transport, boosting trade, creating vast economic growth and new jobs. Investments in digital connectivity will enhance access to secure high-speed internet and close the digital gap. From smartphones to clean energy, critical raw materials are key to sustainable prosperity and resilience. We are working to develop sustainable access and supply chains that create new jobs and bring value to the local communities. Together, we secure clean tech and share the benefits. Together, we are connecting the most remote places across Central Asia. Together, we are partners in change.
Thank you. For example, concretely for Kazakhstan, I would like to mention one initiative, the Digital Team Europe initiative. Since 2020, since the COVID time, Europe is acting together in the sense, I mean, of investment and partnerships with partner countries. together, meaning that not just European Commission, not just the banks like European Investment Bank or EBRD, but also member states work together and join forces in operations, initiatives such as the Digital Connectivity Team Europe initiative. This regional program dedicated to Central Asia will bring, for example, satellite connectivity to villages and schools that are very remote, that are distant from centers of, let's say, far away from Astana, Almaty, or from Tashkent, or from Bishkek. It's a global one. It's a regional for Central Asia. Already we see the first results. I think very important here is that it's going to be a separate satellite connectivity that would allow Central Asia to access the global networks independently, I would say, from the neighbors. And I think you understand what I mean. So we're talking macro scale, access to global internet, and then local scale, underprivileged communities and schools. This is just an example. Of course, Global Gateway is not only about connectivity, be it transport, digital, or energy. It's also about people-to-people contacts. And I think language and communication between people, of course, is an essential element of this. And that's why I'm very happy that this is our topic today. And I'm personally passionate by languages. Maybe indeed a few words about the person who gave his name to this cycle of lectures, Ryszard Kapuściński. We already heard a little bit from Katarzyna, and I think the ambassador also will speak about him. I just want to say, as a reader, you know, I also, of course, I am Polish, like I think most of the speakers. I grew up with his books. It was from his books. I mean, as you can imagine, we were also in the Eastern Bloc. We were a little bit isolated from what's going on in the world. And he was very important, I would say, channel for us to learn about. I mean, for example, I didn't know, probably before his book, The Football War, which is about a war that genuinely started of a football game that ended up in some controversies between two countries, Honduras and Salvador. I think I didn't know before reading his book that those countries existed. So, I mean, this is an example. But he also wrote about this region. He wrote about Central Asia or Azerbaijan. He wrote a very important book, The Imperium, which was about the former Soviet Union just after the fall of the Iron Curtain, just after the dismantlement of the Soviet Union, traveling through almost all the countries. And that also, for me personally, was an important source of knowledge about this fascinating region. And that stayed with me until today, this fascination. Also, I'd like to, and in my last point, to focus a bit on the subject, language policies, in the context of post-colonialism. I'm very eager to listen to Professor and his lecture today. The topic is, I think, extremely important globally, as the world is, I think, has almost fully overcome the colonial trauma, but something remains. And I think also in Kazakhstan, where we witness a situation where I would say still today the majority spoken language is not actually the Kazakh language, but it's the Russian language. And we all know the very complex historical processes that led to this situation. And we observe every day issues around this, like, for example, recently, I mean, I'm a vivid follower of news here in Kazakhstan, the case of the Magnum shop. We see that this is something that remains, I would say, almost a defining issue for Kazakhstan. And I very much look forward to the lecture also, and to the discussion. Yes, the lecture will be about a different country, but I think in the discussion we will also connect to actually the situation in Kazakhstan. I think the topic is very relevant, and I look forward very much to the lecture and the discussion. Thank you very much, Rahmet. Спасибо.
Thank you, Maciej. Richard Kapuscinski traveled the world reporting for over the 50 years, often called the voice of the poor, for his reportage and books describing those often overlooked. His unorthodox approach and profound respect for the people he met challenged controversial understandings. His books has been translated into almost 40 languages. Among them, he covered reportage on Ethiopia. He covered Islamic revolution in Iran and the end of colonial rule in Africa. Covering Angola civil war and imperium, a line of the Soviet Union. He became one of the world's most prominent Polish writers and commentators on the great transformations of his time and overall in human history. Please welcome on the stage Mr. Michal Labenda, who is the head of the Polish diplomatic mission in the Republic of Kazakhstan. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm really very pleased that I can be here today together with you. I look forward to the lecture of Professor Sharma, and this is why my speech will be extremely short. I wanted just to say that Kapuscinski, as you said very properly, is the next is a person in a long row of Polish writers, because for Poles in our turbulent history, language was always very important. It was a necessary tool for preserving our identity. The language was helping us to survive in years of when we didn't have our state. Today, this year, we mark 120 years from the time when our great writer Henryk Sienkiewicz received the first Nobel Prize in Literature, and we are very proud that, for instance, Poland, I don't know if there are many other languages like many other countries like that, we have five writers who received in last 100 years the Nobel Prize in Literature. Kapuscinski is a very important person also for me, because, as Maciej said before, it was like our window for outside world. And honestly speaking, he was the first one who gave me any impression about Kazakhstan and about the region as the whole, because he wrote the book The Kyrgyz Descents from the Horse, and it was about the whole area of Central Asia in 60s. So I won't say anymore, because I'm really thrilled to listen to you, Mr. Professor, and once more, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.
And now, let me introduce our today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Abhimanyu Sharma, who is teaching associate in German linguistics at the University of Cambridge, our long-standing partner university. His research focused on the language policy, sociolinguistics, and German studies. His research much similar with the very core of Richard Kapuscinski's legacy on new paradigms and step beyond out of orthodox views. His book, Reconceptualizing Power in Language Policy, which published in 2022, marks a break of prevalent understanding of power in language policy by offering evidence that macro-level power is not always about control and is susceptible to pressure from below. Please welcome on the stage Dr. Abhimanyu Sharma with his topic today, Language Policy, Development and Inclusion. Dr. Abhimanyu, please.
Hi. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Abhimanyu Sharma. I work at the University of Cambridge, and today I'll talk about the role of language policy in development and how language policies have the potential to create an inclusive society. I would like to begin by expressing my deepest gratitude for being given the opportunity to offer the Kapuscinski Development Lecture at Maqsut Narikbayev University. This is a great honor. Thank you. I'm grateful to be in Kazakhstan for this lecture. My scholarly engagement with Kazakhstan and interest in Kazakhstan began in the month of December 2022 when I booked a flight to New Delhi via Air Astana from London. The flight was a pleasant one, and even more pleasant was my discovery of this great man, Ahmed Baitur Sinuli. The entertainment on the flight offered a wide range of options of movies and television programs. And as I like to watch programs in the local languages with subtitles, of course, I found out by chance about the life and work of Ahmed Baitur Sinuli. His life tells us about the role of language activists in shaping the identity of the nation. Kazakhstan is a very exciting place in terms of languages, and I hope that more research is conducted in this area in the future as it constitutes a fruitful avenue for research. This is the lecture outline for today. I've divided my lecture into 4 parts. In the first part, I'll talk about some concepts. In the second part, I'll talk about language and development, the role of English in India, the question of identity and social mobility. In the third part, I'll talk about language inclusion, policies for deaf people, social stigma, oralism, and sign languages. And in the fourth part, I'll offer conclusions. I'll talk about the challenges for policymakers and what does development mean when it comes to languages and language policy. Oh, this is much better. Thank you. So the first issue that I want to discuss today is, it concerns a dilemma. Is language policy public policy? And I ask this question because whenever we discuss public policy, we often ignore language policy. Perhaps it is related to a bias against languages. More often than not, languages are seen just as tools of communication. Perhaps this bias exists because the impact of languages on our daily life is not as tangible and visible to policymakers as, let us say, eliminating poverty or hunger. We tend to forget that languages are also markers of identity. If you ask, for example, a French person how they identify themselves, or if you ask, for example, a German person how they identify themselves, they might end up saying at some point of time that they are French because they speak French, and they are German because they speak German. And because languages are so inherently intertwined with how we see ourselves, how we define ourselves, they have to be part of public policy because languages play a crucial role in nation building. Languages play a crucial role in defining who or what states are. Now, in the first part, I'll talk about some concepts related to public policy and how they're interrelated with languages. I've given here 2 definitions. First is from the Public Policy Unit of University College London. The second one is taken from Paul Kearney's book, Understanding Public Policy. The Public Policy Unit of University College London defines public policy as the process by which government identifies priorities and makes decisions on how to implement them in order to deliver change. Kearney defines public policy as the sum total of government action from signals of intent to the final outcomes. Two quite interesting definitions. Now, let us look at some more definitions. I'll give you 3 more examples. So, in one of the simplest yet one of the most influential definitions of public policy, Dye in 1972 said, public policy is whatever governments choose to do or not to do. Cotran and others in 2005 said that public policies are actions of government and the intentions that determine those actions. Schneider and Ingram defined policy designs as observable phenomena found in statutes, administrative guidelines, code decrees, programs, and even practices and procedures of street-level bureaucrats. Now, let us try to analyze this a little bit in detail. So we can see that we can analyze public policy from the viewpoint of a number of variables. It can be defined in terms of choice, actions, intentions, and results. Choice would be what do governments choose to do, actions, what actions government take, intentions, what are the intentions, and results, what are their results? Does it lead to creation of policy guidelines? Does it lead to creation of statutes? Does it lead to creation of white papers, green papers, etc.? Now, I will offer you some examples of what policies do. So far, we have only talked about the different viewpoints from which we can analyze policies. So public policy, Kenny mentions some examples. For example, why did so many governments decide to bail out banks rather than let them fold? Why did many governments privatize their industries and introduce private sector ideas to the public sector? Why have so many governments introduced major tobacco control policies while others have opposed further controls? And why did the UK government introduce the poll tax on, or the Australian government reform gun laws? Now, I have talked so much about policies. The question is, where is language? Why is language ignored in public policy? And languages are generally not thought of when one talks about public policy. So I've given you an example of this handbook, the Routledge Handbook of Public Policy. It mentions the term language 68 times, but none of them explicitly deal with language policy. I give you one more example. This is a screenshot of the Bennett Institute of Public Policy, affiliated with the University of Cambridge. It mentions a number of priority areas. You can look here: mental well-being, productivity and work, the wealth economy, the townscapes project, but language does not feature here. Now, I want to say that languages should be considered and language policy should be considered part of public policy. It's because the sum total of actions taken by governments also affect which languages we use. It affects which languages we learn in schools. It affects which languages are taught in universities. It affects which languages are used in the media. These choices do not emerge in a vacuum. They, more often than not, such choices are ideological. And now I'll come to the section 2 of part 1. I'll talk about language policy. Regarding the choices being intertwined with ideology, I talked in my book, Reconceptualizing Power and Language Policy, which languages are promoted at the expense of which ones and why. Okay, I looked at 6 different case studies, the European Union, Luxembourg, Wales, India, Manipur, and Tamil Nadu. I looked at 8 different policy domains, including administration, education, media, healthcare, business, social welfare. And I looked at language policy legislation related to all these policy domains. My focus was on finding out the role of power in formulation of language policy. What I found out is that in the domains of healthcare and health and safety, dominant language ideologies, so no matter which is the dominant language or no matter which language is promoted by the state, but in the matter of healthcare and health and safety, dominant language ideologies are abandoned and the government policy makes room for minority languages. Now, we should consider languages as part of public policy because they affect different domains of life. They are needed in healthcare. In Kazakhstan, for example, so many languages are spoken. There is Kazakh, Russian, English, German, Uzbek, Kyrgyz. Now, if a speaker of a minority language needs healthcare services in his or her mother tongue, it would be difficult for them if they do not get the service in their mother tongue. Similarly, languages are needed in businesses. Languages are needed in courtrooms if you are speaker of a minority language and you do not know the language of the language of the majority, it might be very difficult for you to make a case for yourself. It might be very difficult for you if you're running a business. So I've given you, and this is, I've given you examples of how languages are present everywhere. So I've written product labels are a key example of language policy. Any product, oh, we also have the TESE here too. And if you look at the product labeling, it says non-carbonated drinking water in 3 different languages. It says Russian, Kazakh, and English. If you look at further details, you'll find it in Russian and Kazakh. I want you to think about why these languages are chosen. Okay, why only Russian and Kazakh, and why not other languages? And I'm not being critical of Kazakhstan's language policy here. I'm making a case for think about your country, or think about any country you're familiar with. Think about which languages are put in products and which ones are promoted in which domains. Now, I've written here in the matters of health and safety. This is, I took it on the flight once again. Air Astana flights are quite an enlightening experience for me. It's here, you see the languages they're used are Russian, Kazakh, English, French, German, Chinese, and if I'm not mistaken, they're Japanese. So you have information given in a lot many languages than, for example, in business, you have only 3 languages, and here you have 6 languages. So when it comes to health and safety, multiple languages are used. Now, I'll give you one example from the European Union. This is Council Regulation EC number 235/2004 regarding anti-dumping duties on the import of certain seamless pipes. So I'll give you a show. So this is a picture of a seamless pipe. Now, this is a regulation, and I'm not focused on the product of seamless pipes. I'm just focusing on the language aspect of it, because language policies are hidden in places where you don't expect them to be. So this statute makes the provision that the production certificate containing details such as name and address of the company and its customers will be in 4 languages. It will be in language of the country of the producer, English, French, and German. I want you to think about why only English, French, and German, in addition to the language of the producer. Why not other languages? Because the European Union follows the policy of official multilingualism. There are 23, 24 official languages, and we are promoting only 3 of them. I want you to think about what could be the reason behind making these choices. I want to point out that this regulation is not in force anymore. Now, languages in public spaces. I was taking a walk this morning. I found this nice examples. You see representation of Kazakh, Russian, and English. You also see in one place in Zenith Avenue, I saw only 2 languages, English, and if I'm not mistaken, that's Kazakh. In some cases, it could be controversial. This is an example from Northern Ireland. So street signs are not always an easy issue. You see below there is English, and what is vandalized is in Irish. Okay, so sometimes it can become controversial. I want you to think about why it is controversial. And let me remind you, all of this is related to public policy because it's in the interest of the public. Now, one of the final points of this section is about language policy reflecting social reality. Quite an interesting one. So I have taken the example from British legislation. I've talked about 3 statutes here. In the first one, you see Welsh Courts Act 1942. It says any party or witness who considers that he would be otherwise at disadvantage by reason of his natural language of communication being Welsh may use Welsh, but all records shall be in English. Now let us move on to 1967, 25 years ahead. 67 says this act allows Welsh to be used by any party, witness, or other person who desires to use it. So from being an option, it becomes a matter of desire. In 1993, it says in conduct of public business and administration, English and Welsh should be treated on the basis of equality. So it tells you how slowly in language policy you can see greater democratization taking place. In 42, it was just an option. In 67, it became a matter of desire. In 1993, it becomes an equal language. So it tells you how democratization takes place, and this is reflected in legislation. I'll give you now examples from linguistics, where I talk about modal verbs. So generally, when it comes to matters of civic registration, like registration of marriages, births, deaths, one would never think that this is related to language policy. How can it be related to language policy? But let us look at this statute. It says the 71 forms shall be completed in English and may be completed in Welsh. Okay, so shall, which is obligation, is for English. English is obligatory. And may, which is optional, is for Welsh. Let's now move on to 87, 16 years ahead. Forms 8 and 9 may be completed in English only or in both English and Welsh. The registrar shall enter the particulars in both English and Welsh. So shall, the obligation is for English only. In 1999, it says forms shall be completed in English and shall also be completed in Welsh. So you see through the use of modal verbs, how obligation is represented at the textual level, is represented at the linguistic level, and it tells you how what happens at the level of society is reflected in the inner structures of the language. Now, these examples tells us that linguistic choices are inherently intertwined with desires and intentions of the state and hence constitute public policy. Now, let us move on to the part about development. There are two approaches to development. On the one hand, we have talks about economic and income growth, but we also have the matters of addressing power inequality and the distribution of welfare. I'll talk about the modernization paradigm. Brinkerhoff and Brinkerhoff say that regarding the development question, the predominant view is informed by modernization theory, which posits that development is a process that moves countries and their citizens progressively along a path to Western-style liberal economies and democratic governance. Now, Rebecca Surinder in 2019 says, the intervening 2 decades have witnessed a rising interest in the significance of social policy in the management of welfare and risk in the developing world, and a growing recognition that social development and economic development, they are not mutually exclusive. Okay? Now, I want to talk about the idea of development and freedom propounded by Amartya Sen, who won Nobel Prize in 1998, one of the greatest economists and social thinkers of our times. He says development is the process of expanding the real freedom. We should not merely focus on GDP or GNP. Development requires the removal of major sources of unfreedom. He says development, as it can be seen, as a process of expanding the real freedoms that people enjoy. Focusing on human freedoms contrasts with narrower views of development, such as identifying development with the gross national product, or with the rise in personal incomes, or with industrialization, or with technological advance, or social modernization. Now, the question is, does language policy contribute to development? If yes, then how? And now I'll move on to the second part of my talk, language policy and development, where I talk about how in India, the role of English has been controversial in terms of development and providing freedom. So briefly about India, India has 28 states and 8 union territories. We gained independence from the British colonial rule in 1947. Our constitution came into force in 1950. We follow a policy of official multilingualism. We have 23 official languages. Hindi and English are cross-regional official languages. And the top 5 major languages in India are Hindi, Bangla, Marathi, Telugu, and Tamil. Now, all these languages, they did not become official at the same time. As you see, we had 14 languages at first as official, and that happened in 1965. In 67, Sindhi was included in this list, and the list of official languages is called the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. In 1967, Sindhi was included in this list. In 1992, Konkani, Manipuri, and Nepali. And in 2003, Maithili, Santhali, Bodo, and Dogri. This is the list of official languages of India: Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, Gujarati, Urdu, and so on and so forth. Now, I want to start this part by giving you some context. This is a book published in 2009 by Skutnap Kangas, Robert Philipson, Ajit Mohanty, and Meniti Panda. Here, Ajit Mohanty talks about his encounter with a schoolboy in the state of Orissa. And the schoolboy tells him that indigenous tribal people in this part of the world were subject of too much research, but nothing has changed and nothing will. This had a lasting impact on the thinking of Mohanty. And when I was doing my doctoral research, I found this so moving. I could not work for 3 days after I read this, because it made me realize that we do a lot of research. We treat people as subjects, but what about them? Does any real development, does any real change happen at the ground level? Now, the main question in this regard is, and I'll talk about the instrumentality and identity approach, is what role does English play in the Indian education system? There are two key approaches. One is the instrumentality approach, which says that English should be promoted as a means of socio-economic mobility for disadvantaged communities. And the second approach is the identity approach taken by scholars like Skutnap Kangas and Mohanty, who say that English medium instruction leads to cultural alienation of school children and they propose mother tongue-based multilingual education as the alternative. Now, this has to be viewed in context of what was the role of English in India before the independence of India. I have mentioned here the name of Thomas Babington Macaulay. In his Macaulay's Minutes in 1835, he said that he wanted to form a class of Indians who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, a class of persons Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinion, in morals, and intellect. Now, such a policy has become subject of much criticism, as it should be. Robert Philipson, writing in 1992, describes such policy as linguicism. Now, with regard to English, so on the one hand, we have the colonial association, but now we have another approach too. So one approach is English endangers local languages and perpetuates inequality. And the second approach is taken by scholars like Viniti Vash, who say that English is an agent of decolonization that enables the urban poor to access the global economy. So on the one hand, you have the colonial association. On the one hand, you have also talks about decolonizing role of English. Now, here we need to talk about language hierarchies. When India was fighting for its independence from colonial rule, political leaders such as Mahatma Gandhi wanted to substitute English with an Indian language as the main language of administration. And after independence, the most favored language was to be designated, the official language was Hindi or Hindustani. So we wanted to follow the one nation, one language model that was prevalent in Europe. Now, the use of English as an associate official language, and this was the original plan, while Hindi remained the main official language, was allowed for a period of 15 years, starting from 26 January 1950, the day in which Indian Constitution came into force. What happened then? In 1965, when Hindi was to become the only official language of India, there were widespread protests all over India. You can see protests in Tamil Nadu. So there were widespread protests against Hindi. There were protests against what was called Hindi imperialism, which is an irony in itself. So first we fought against English imperialism, but then in India, we fought against Hindi imperialism in 1965. And the Indian government agreed to allow the use of English as the main language of communication between the center and the states, and for various other administrative purposes. This is a picture of the protests in 1965. Now, as a result of this, the policy transformed the status of English in India by making it the most dominant language, something we wanted to avoid after independence, but something that did happen. And the languages that were dominant at the regional level, such as Tamil or Telugu, assumed third place. So you have English, you have, I think I have a picture here. So you have English, then you have official languages of India, then you have dialects of official languages, then you have non-official languages, then you have dialects of non-official languages, and then you have languages that are not recognized. So when we do census keeping, languages that have fewer than 10,000 speakers, that are not taken into account, or they're grouped with broader languages of the region. Now, this creates a hierarchy of languages. Mohanty says all multilingual societies in South Asia characteristically show signs of hierarchical multilingualism with English at the top. And this linguistic double divide in the hierarchical power structure of languages leads to deprivation and impoverishment of languages, threats of language shift and endangerment and identity crisis. Now, let us talk about the linguistic double divide. Jean-Jacques Weber says the great or the double divide is primarily between people, okay, and only derivatively between languages. Weber says it is people who suffer from deprivation and impoverishment or form identity crisis, and the people who are most deprived and impoverished are often also those whose languages are most marginalized. Skudnap Kangas, on the other hand, says English as the only medium of higher education leads to cultural alienation. What do we do? The picture is not so easy. It's a bit complicated. We also have dominance of regional languages. So English is not the only dominating force of India. Power and ideology come into play at different levels, and domination subordination patterns also occur at the state level. So I'll talk about Marwari, a language spoken in Rajasthan, and I want to show you a picture of, so here, I'm not sure if I have a pointer here, but if you look closer to Pakistan, we have the state Rajasthan. And in Rajasthan, different languages are spoken. Now, in 2004, there was a proposal to make one of the official languages of India. Now, it is a regional language spoken in the state of Rajasthan. This proposal was met with resistance from speakers of different languages that were spoken in Rajasthan. So their proposal was that they would want to keep Hindi as the official language of the state, and they did not want Marwari to become one of the official languages of India because they would feel subordinated by Marwari. What I want to show is that at the broader national level, Hindi, there was opposition against Hindi, but at the state level, there was support for Hindi and opposition against a locally dominant language. One more challenge that we have is how do we define mother tongue? Can we achieve mother tongue-based education? It is difficult because of two reasons. One, we have large amount of linguistic variation in India, which makes it difficult to define what mother tongue means. And on this topic, all of you maybe come from different countries, different places. Think of the language you speak. How many dialects does it have? How many varieties does it have? For Kazakh language, I presume there are 2 or 3 different dialects. The language that is spoken in Astana might be different from the Kazakh that is spoken in Almaty. Similarly, in India, we have a lot of diversity, and it is a challenge to define what a mother tongue is. And the ideology of standardization creates an impediment to educational attainment of speakers of marginalized varieties. Now, Khub Chandani says, the acquisition of standardized languages such as Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, Marathi, and Tamil is more like learning a second language for speakers of marginalized varieties. And Barua and others, writing in 2015, they say that in Orissa, and I'll show you where Orissa is. So Orissa is in this part of India, closer to West Bengal. So in Orissa, tribal peoples who speak their own dialect were handicapped by the fact that they were taught in Oriya, the state's official language and the medium of instruction. So quite a complicated picture. Now let us move on to the challenges for policymakers. The main challenge for policymakers is to devise policies that are more inclusive. When dealing with plural societies, we would do well to realize that the risk involved in finding uniform solutions. The overall guiding spirit should be to create a language environment which meets the demands of social justice, bearing in mind the specific needs of minority cultures. Now I'll talk about the economic aspect. So far, I talked about the social aspect. Let's talk about the economic aspect. Munshi and Rosenzweig in 2006 noted that attending English medium schools increases both women's and men's incomes by about 25%. In 2011, Azam and others note that compared to men who have no English ability, men who are fluent in English earn 34% higher hourly wages, while men who speak a little English earn 30% more. Chakrabarti and Bakshi in 2016 noted that there is a 10% lower probability of learning, a 10% lower probability of learning English in primary schools leads to an 8% decline in weekly wages. Okay, so there is tangible, significant impact of learning or not learning English. Conclusions for this part, English medium instruction could be deemed a better policy as it helps individuals with social mobility. In terms of instrumentality versus identity debate, it would mean that the instrumentality aspect should be or could be prioritized for some people as English acts as means to climb up the social ladder. But the challenge is it really development when economic growth comes at the cost of freedom? Okay. Now I'll move on to the third section. So far, I've talked only about spoken languages. Okay. Let us now talk about sign languages. Something that I want to say, there are some problematic terms that are used in this in the slides. They are not my terms. I have taken them verbatim from the official policies. Now, in India, okay, so let's it's not visual yet. Okay, so the population of people with disability in India is circa 27 million. Those with hearing disability is about 5 million. This is data from the 2011 census of India, disabled population in India. You see people with hearing disability are about 0.42% of the total population of India and 18.9% of the total disabled population, about 5 million people with hearing disability in India. This is a pie chart showing disabled population in India by disability type. Now, what is the problem? The problem is that the needs of DHH, which means deaf and hard of hearing, needs of DHH ignored by policy making. There is neglect, which is evident in both academic and political discourse, and there is also social neglect. You see neglect of deaf and hard of hearing in academic discourse. Knors, Bronze, and Marshak observe that although 80% of the global population suffering from developmental disabilities live in countries in the developing world, over 90% of the research related to developmental disabilities has focused on the situation of children in developed countries. Okay, so there is a clear neglect there. Then in political discourse, I'll show you some data from the upper house of the Indian Parliament, how many debates occur in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. You see In 50s, there were close to 20 debates. In 60s, the number dropped. In 70s, the number dropped a bit further. 80s grew a bit, but 90s, it remained the same. 2000s increased a bit. And 2010s, finally, the number increased. Overall, not a large number of debates about deaf and hard of hearing people in the upper house of the Indian Parliament. Then what are the consequences of different forms of neglect? There is feeling of low self-esteem among people with hearing disability. It is caused by social attitudes that consider disability to be the results of a person's misdeeds in previous life. A belief that is observed in almost all of the religions in India, as noted by Mandke and Chandekar. And then there is a problem of high school dropout rates. So this graph tells you about the proportion of out-of-school children aged 6 to 13 for various groups. So all children in India, close to 204 million, estimated out of school 6 million. The proportion is 2.97, close to 3%. All disabled, about 2 million, estimated out of school 600,000, about 28%. Notice for the hearing disability, about 220,000 children having a hearing disability, out of which 42,000 are out of schools. And this means 19% of these children are out of school. They don't go to school or they have dropped out. Now, what is the impact of definition? How a disability is defined in the census has a bearing on the number of children or people with hearing disability, and this has a bearing on the policies that are made. See, if you are numerically not strong enough to make an impact, to cause an impact on policies, maybe the policy making will not take into account your needs, which is what happens, as I'll show you, give you the examples of different censuses. In the 1981 census, only 3 broad categories of physical disability were employed, namely totally blind, totally dumb, and totally crippled. And I want to point out, these terms are not mine. They're problematic. They're taken verbatim from the official policy. As a result of this poorly defined categorization, the number of disabled in the 1981 census, they remained undercounted. In 1991, there was no mention of disability types in the census. This happened because of inherent reservations of population to share this information. See, there was so much social stigma attached with hearing disability or any disability. People were not willing to share this information. Now, in 2001 census, disability was measured using 5 different types: seeing, movement, mental, speech, and hearing. In 2011, it increased to 8 different types. Now, here is a comparative analysis of what was the definition in 2001 and 2011. In 2001, it says one cannot hear at all or can hear only loud sounds, hearing problems with one ear. In 2011, one cannot hear at all. You have difficulty in hearing day-to-day conversation. Focus on this aspect. Focus on what is not a disability. In 2001, if you're using hearing aid, it means you don't have a disability, but this changes in 2011. And this has a bearing on the number of people that are noted with having hearing disability in 2011. So the number of those with hearing impairment is significantly increased from 1 million in 2000 to 5 million in 2011. This means that if you use the right criteria, you will get to the right numbers. If you get to the right numbers, maybe you'll make right policies. So policies are directly proportional to demographics. Fewer numbers mean lack of enough policies, which means neglect. Maharashtra, one of the states of India, has about 500,000 deaf and close to 500,000 mute age 1 and above. However, the state has only 3 government-run schools for such children. Teaching methods are not developed. Teachers use lip movement instead of using sign language, which leads to, once again, as I said, low self-esteem among children with hearing disability and high school dropout rates. Now I'll talk about policies for such children. I'll focus only on 2 domains, media and the education. There are 2 acts in Indian legislation related to people with disability. One is Persons with Disability Act, 1995, and then Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016. Now, in the media, prior to the 2016 Act, in there was very little provision, okay? For example, in 1987, Doordarshan, India's national television channel, started broadcasting news for those with hearing and speech impairment. There was no provision for closed captioning or subtitling. Now, what did the 2016 Act do? It brought about some major changes. It says that persons with hearing impairment can have access to television programs with sign language interpretation or subtitles. In 2019, India's Ministry of Information and Broadcasting released an official memorandum on accessibility standards in television programs for hearing and speech impaired. Now, what did this proposal say? If you look at the numbers, it tells you gradually in different categories how from 2019 to 2025, this number should include. There should be greater representation in every single area of programs that is broadcast on TV. And one challenge that we faced was COVID 2019. Because of COVID, coronavirus pandemic, this wasn't implemented as well as it should have been, but there's work still in progress. Now, let us move on to the domain of education. There was no discussion of sign languages in the National Policy for Education 68 and 1986. The 1995 Act says, appropriate governments shall prepare a comprehensive education scheme which shall make provision for the restructuring the curriculum for the benefit of students with hearing impairment to facilitate them to take only one language as part of their curriculum. There is a catch here, okay? It says only one language. India follows a policy of 3-language formula, which means you learn Hindi, you learn English, and you learn the local language, dominant language of the state. The challenge with this one is it is treating sign language as being, it is not actually including sign language. It is saying that hearing children should learn either Hindi or English or the local language. There is no discussion of sign language. That's where it becomes tricky for people, for children with hearing disability, that the policy making is not taking into account the needs that you might have. This change in 2016, which says, the Act says deaf students should be taught in the most appropriate language and modes of communication. So there is scope for using sign languages. I'll talk about oralism now, one of the biggest challenges. Oralism means that deaf pupils are encouraged to read lips and speak instead of using sign language. In order to understand oralism, one needs to realize that communication can also occur through signs and not only through a spoken form. Oralism doesn't allow deaf students to use sign languages in the classroom. This approach dominated in the US in the 1960s, after which ASL gradually came to be accepted. And a key reason for the decline of the oralist approach was the movement launched by the deaf community for their rights. Something similar has not happened in India yet to the same effect. In India, the situation is a bit different. The oralist versus sign language debate has persisted in India as majority of schools continue to use oralism. Some recent positive changes that I would like to talk about is the establishment of the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center in 2015. Then this center launched the first ever Indian Sign Language Dictionary. In 2018, the dictionary consisted of 3,000 terms, which was further expanded to 6,000 in the second edition. The latest edition consists of 10,000 terms. Policy measures taken by ISL-RTC, the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center, offers 2 courses, namely Diploma in Indian Sign Language Interpretation and Diploma in Teaching Indian Sign Language. It offers a stipend of 5,000 rupees per month, which is close to $68 or 30,000 tenge, to students of the latter course. Now, in 2020, the National Education Policy 2020 was launched. Article 4.22 of this policy says that Indian Sign Language will be standardized across the country, and national and state curriculum materials will be developed for use by students with hearing impairment. Vis-a-vis local sign languages, it says that they will be respected and taught as well wherever possible and relevant. So finally, we have some positive change. After 70 years of independence, we have some room for sign language users in India. Still, there is a catch because when you say it will be respected and taught as well wherever possible and relevant, wherever possible and relevant is quite an ambiguous term. So where it is possible, where it is relevant, who will decide where it is possible, where it is relevant, that is a challenging issue. Now, conclusions for this part. So policy making is becoming slowly more inclusive, but a lot more work is to be done. Currently, there are only 387 schools for deaf and hard of hearing children, which is not a lot. And in my latest paper that got published last month, I made some policy recommendations. First, there should be official recognition of the Indian Sign Language. More schools for children with hearing and speech impairment should be opened. Regular impact assessment should be conducted, and then there is need for more intensive research, for example, also on oralism. Now, finally, overall conclusions. Language policy, as I have tried to show, is a challenging area and should be part of public policy. Policy making should be inclusive. The question of sign languages should be incorporated in policy. And the question of development remains tricky because English, it does guarantee economic growth, as I showed to you, but it comes at the cost of freedom, as told by some scholars, that it leads to cultural alienation of speakers. That will be all for today. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I think now we can move to the question and answer session, so we can take a seat here.
Oh, with my microphone. Can you please show the last slide, which I did have written? Thank you for everyone. Yeah, the last one.
All right, and I also need to require our colleagues to demonstrate a QR code to the app we call Slido. So if you have a question which you would love to ask, but don't want to use the microphone from the audience, you can also write your question right here. And now, well, after your lecture, we have here most of the students here are representing our bachelor programs in applied linguistics, in translation studies. What can we say? Language matters. It was quite inspiring for our students to learn more about the language policy, how it's working in India. Here at MNU, we have a school of liberal arts, providing the biggest number of foreign language in Kazakhstan to study. We have around 10 languages offered by the school, and most of the students representing these particular bachelor programs. Hands up and feel free to ask your question. This way, please.
Yes, and I want to say that I would like to thank all the students who have taken the time to come here and listen to my talk. I really appreciate it.
Dr. Sharma, thank you for such an interesting lecture. The idea about decolonizing role of English, I think, is very interesting and something that we should learn all about. I encourage the students to do so. I'm not a student myself. I'm a faculty member, and my research is actually about language policy and planning in Kazakhstan. And I have such a question for you. As you mentioned, India as a case study, I think many formerly colonial countries, when they gain independence, they end up with a linguistic turmoil, right? So, like some of them, they engage in protectionist language policies and protectionist towards formerly marginalized languages. But society, like inside the country and international community, very rarely look at these protectionist policies with purely positive like look, right? So the perspective may be quite negative, there might be quite a lot of criticism. So in your opinion, is there any way a country can revitalize formerly marginalized languages, but not at the expense of dominant languages? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I think if you are trying to revitalize minority languages, I do not think it will be at the expense of dominant languages, because dominant language are dominant for a reason. They are there, they are most likely dominant because they're language of the majority. So in that sense, if you try to revitalize minority languages, it will not be at the expense of dominant ones. There is a way to revitalize them. If you want to revitalize minority languages, make sure that at the primary level, in primary level education, also in secondary level education, you give room to such languages. You design course books, you include them in school teaching. You also, apart from education, you also incorporate such languages in the media. And when I say media, here the state can come into play and offer funding for programs in minority languages. So there can be radio programs or there can be television programs in minority languages. Now, because minority languages themselves might not be able to provide funding for such program, the state can take the role of offering this funding, because in order for language to survive, you need funding, you need money. Money matters. So that will be my suggestion to any state government, to any state that is interested in revitalizing its minority languages. Make sure that you include them in at least two domains, education and media, and provide funding for it. So that will be my answer to your question.
Thank you. Any more from audience? We have, okay.
Hello, my name is Altnay. I'm a first year's course student. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming here, giving us an interesting lecture. Thank our university for giving us an opportunities to listen this kind of interesting speech. And my question is, what opportunities and challenges do you see for Kazakhstan in developing inclusive languages policies? Thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you very much for your question, and thank you also for coming to my talk. It's a quite difficult question that you have asked me. I'm not an expert of language policy of Kazakhstan. I'm not best placed to respond to that question. If we are talking about revitalizing or protecting minority languages, my answer would be the same or almost the same that I have given to the first question. If you want to protect or revitalize minority languages, make sure that you include them in education at the primary level and at the secondary level. Make sure that you make radio and television programs in these languages. Make sure that these are included in these two domains. In Kazakhstan, if I'm not mistaken, different languages are spoken. There is, besides Kazakh and Russian, and there is English, German, Uzbek, Kyrgyz, a lot more many languages for which I think you or other speakers might be better placed to respond to that question. So yeah, I think that would be my response to it. If you would like to ask further, more precisely, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, we also had a question from here, Nurdaulet. Okay.
Okay. Hello, Professor Sharma. Thank you very much for your lecture. I had maybe a methodological question. I feel like So it was really interesting to hear about language policy from the angle of policy making. But when thinking about it, I feel like sometimes we can notice that in certain cases, the whole idea of policy making, of studying it, is premised on the idea that policy making pursues the goals it states it pursues. Whereas I think it can also sometimes act as a facade for processes of accumulation by certain groups of people, or as or hiding social stratification. So in a way, in cases like this, I would like to know, where would you start studying language because in society? Because you have shown us, for example, examples of policy, like for example, the case in Wales. But where would you start studying it when we see it in very diffuse phenomena? For example, we mentioned this controversy about the supermarket that did something about language with their delivery system that didn't play out well. This is also, I think, fostered by social networks, no? Because certain things become very, I don't know, like media visible. Yeah. So yeah, where would you start studying it when maybe laws and policy documents are not what they claim to be, or maybe suspected of being such? I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your question. If you're talking about just studying policy, just studying and not devising, if I'm examining policy, my first question would be, what is my aim? What am I trying to do? What I'm trying to look for? If I'm trying to look for hidden agendas, okay, I would look in a very critical manner. So let's talk about linguistic landscape. Linguistic landscape means the representation of different languages in public places. If you notice in some of my slides, I showed to you how different languages are represented in street signs. Or if you have a dustbin, it can have information written paper. It can be written in Russian or Kazakh, kagaz or mul. So linguistic landscape, it refers to representation of one language or different languages in public places, in train station, in government buildings. If you're looking for hidden agendas, okay, so you should look for which languages are represented there and which are not represented. Okay, so it can be that there are multiple languages spoken in a particular state, in a district, in a country. Some are represented, some are not. If you're looking for hidden agendas, you should look for which are not represented. Amongst the language that are represented, you should look for which language is represented in a bigger font and which is written in a smaller font. And sometimes there can be actual policies. For example, I remember when I was studying the legislation of Luxembourg, one of the policies was about the identity card of people who were sea travelers, okay? And the policy said very clearly that on the identity card, the French language will be published in bigger font. So if I'm not mistaken, the term was majuscule. And the other language, it could be German or Luxembourgish or English, will be published in smaller font. So if you're looking for hidden agendas, you should look for which is not included, and amongst the languages that are included, which is published in smaller fonts. If you're looking for creating, sorry, I'm going ahead, I'm giving a very long-winded response to your question. If you're looking for creating an inclusive policy, then you should look for states for which research studies show that, research studies claim that they have best practices. And you should try to emulate that in the country for which you're trying to devise the policy. I think you wanted to say something, Miras.
No, I'm just to remember we have
A lot of questions.
Slido, and we also have some questions online. And if I may, I will combine some questions. Our colleague Łukasz Nazarkov from Białystok University of Technology in Poland asked a question, which I would like to combine with a couple of anonymous questions. Is there any evidence of better development performance in countries with robust language policies? And what are the key, and what do you think translation can act as a form of language activism, especially when translating from underrepresented or minority languages?
Thanks to Lucas for this asking this very interesting question. Really, thanks a lot, because in my presentation, there is so much that I want to talk about, but you cannot say everything that you want to say. So thank you for asking me about evidence. There is something called evidence-based policy making. Okay, evidence-based policy making focuses on evidence for best practices that can create a holistic and inclusive policy. So an example of evidence-based policy making would be, the government is giving £500,000 for a certain policy. Now, you would see whether this money is really given, and if this money is given, is this being properly used? What was the original intention? Is the original intention being actually implemented? So you do research, you analyze the original intention and the policy implementation, and that's how you try to do evidence-based policy making. You look for evidence, and then based on whatever are shortcomings that are evident through analysis, you propose better policies for creating, let's say, for devising better policies. So that would be evidence-based policy making. The second part of the question was about translation. I'll give a very brief response. European Union has a policy of official multilingualism. I believe that translation can lead to a more inclusive and better policy if you focus not only on English, French, and German, but also focus on other languages such as Romanian or Polish, Finnish. So please also focus on other languages, translate the legal documents in those languages too, so that people feel included and they also have access to information in their own language.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. We have wide range of quite popular questions on Kazakhstan. That's why I would love to move to our live audience. Nurdaulet, please.
Hello again. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Abhimanyu, for your lecture. It was really interesting and fascinating to know about some stuff about India, because like last month, I've been to India myself. I visited many states there, and I was amazed how when we crossed the states, the languages change all the time. So we had like our support delegations from the government, they had to change languages all the time between Tamil, Telugu, and English. But English was the most convenient and useful language there, actually. And today, concerning on their presentation, I have like two questions, I would say. And you mentioned that while drafting like health and safety instructions, like minority languages are essential to be included, right? And what about the legal documents? Like, for example, in Kazakhstan, we know that in the 90s and the early 2000s and during the Soviet period, Russian language was a dominant language. And the legal documents that were drafted back then, they were mainly written in Russian, then translated into Kazakh. But if I'm not mistaken, at this like Kazakh University, Narikbayev University, there's a teaching staff whose name is Sagidola, and he recently published a book, and he identified that there are differences between the legal documents in Kazakh and Russian languages, and they may be interpreted like differently. Like one term is translated differently. So mainly when there is a court or like judging going on, like people try to choose Russian language because it's convenient and people can understand what term and what their main ideas, the main problem is. So are there any examples in India, like how you mentioned between Hindi and non-Hindi states, that they face these kind of challenges and how they try to solve these kind of issues? And the second, my question would be like, should Kazakhstan in general, or like any other nation in Central Asia, should they strive to become a one language state like France is doing, for example? We know like in France, like there are many different regional languages, but since the 17th, 18th centuries, they're trying to stick with the French language as official language, and they're giving more importance to one language. So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quite an interesting set of questions. First, I would like to say that I have similar experience in Europe. When I lived in Switzerland, a German-speaking country, just a 2-hour train ride, and then I'm in Italy, a completely different country with a completely different language. And for me, it was fascinating that you take a train for 2 hours, and then you're in France, speaks French, you're in Italy, speaks Italian. Quite an interesting experience for me. Now, coming to your question, I'll respond to the first question about translation issues. When you're talking about legislation, and when you're anyone who is interested in analyzing language policy and legislation, when you're reading legislation, always look for which language is considered authoritative. It will say very clearly, in cases of discrepancies, in cases of doubt, XYZ language is to be considered authoritative. In the UK, in a lot of legislation, English is the language. As I showed to you, if you have Welsh and Scottish Gaelic, Irish, English is the authoritative language. In India, it is English. Our constitution is both in Hindi and English. If there is ever any doubt, English language is the authoritative language, no matter how many languages we speak. Now, it plays once again into the question of decolonization and accepting English as one of our languages, but it is a tricky one. In any case, it has, I would say, proved to be a good policy so far, because a good policy is something that creates minimum controversy, in my opinion. Now, about your second question, could you please ask me?
About the one language policy.
One language policy like France. I'm talking to diplomats, professors, and students, all of you. There's something I would like to say. When it comes to language policy, France is not the country that I would treat as a role model, because it is very much oriented towards French language. There are so many languages spoken in France. There is Alsatian, Corsican, Catalan. So many languages are spoken in France. They are focused only on French. France is not a country that I would look up to, and I would never recommend to follow one language policy. Having one language, it helps you because it makes things efficient for administration and communication. But for the purposes of national integration, for equality at social and national level, it is not the best route. That would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Just to mention, Nur Daulet, even if he is majoring in international relations, is actually very much engaged with the language policy, translating most of the Disney movies to Kazakh language. And I think in this part, we are ready to sum up because of the time. Dr. Sharma, once again, thank you very much for your brilliant language on language and language policy. Now we understand the huge importance of the language policy, starting from our daily life to public policy, which affects our life even more. I would love to thank, on behalf of my chairman, myself, the team who organized this lecture perfectly, our School of Liberal Arts, just to mention, because for the last couple of hours we discussed the language. I want to say particular thank you to the team of our interpreters today, working hardly to translate everything to the audience. So thank you very much. And as a part of our university tradition, Dr. Sharma, it is your first visit to MNU. And as far as we have this beautiful tradition, I would love to invite our Dean, Dr. Narikbayeva, to present you MNU welcome box.
Dear guests, dear students, first of all, let me, on behalf of our university and School of Liberal Arts, to thankful words to Dr. Sharma. And it is our tradition to make such a kind of gift to our outstanding guests. So it is the box, welcome box, with merch inside. So, and now I think Dr. Sharma is a part of our community. And I do really hope that today's lecture, first of all, inspired you, dear our students, because, you know, in a year, on 2 years, you're going to do your research, and maybe language policy is going to be a topic, and you will have contacts of our friend, Dr. Sharma. So thank you very much on behalf, once again, from school and the university.
Thank you very much.